And of course, we always do honor to the Word of God as we stand and read His precious Word. I am reading this morning from the New Living Translation. And I suppose I should take just a moment to welcome our internet friends with us as well this morning. Psalm 120, verse 1. I took my troubles to the Lord. I cried out to Him, and He answered my prayer. Rescue me, O Lord, from liars and from all deceitful people. O deceptive tongue, what will God do to you? How will He increase your punishment? You will be pierced with sharp arrows and burned with glowing coals. This would be a great passage to preach hellfire and brimstone, wouldn't it? How I suffer in far-off Meshach. It pains me to live in distant Kebar. I am tired of living among people who hate peace. I search for peace. But when I speak of peace, they want war. Father, bless, Lord, I pray, the reading of your word. May you make it a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And Lord, I pray today that as a nation we look tomorrow to celebrate 246 years of freedom. And as we see so much anger and so much division across our country, dear God, I know that the answer to true peace is to know Jesus as Savior. I thank you for those who on this holiday have come to worship you in this place, who have turned aside to spend time with us. And I pray, Lord, that your Spirit would lead me in what I would say today. I want this time to be profitable to all who are here. If there is one today who is discouraged, may they find refreshment in you. If there is one, Lord, who has anger in their heart, may you trade that anger for peace and for contentment. And if there is one who knows not Christ as Savior, I pray that before our time is finished today, they would come to know you, that they would seek you out for the salvation that only you can provide. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. You may be seated. Now I need to do just a little bit of house cleaning before I get into the message today. Those of you who were here 3 weeks ago, I'm sure you came expecting me to finish the message I started 3 weeks ago, but that's not going to be the case. However, we are going to continue along the subject that we began, and that being the subject of prayer. Now remember your number. We have many visitors with us today, and thank you so much for being with us. So you're going to have to play catch up with us. When we began our series on prayer, what I did was I asked everyone to put a number in their mind of the amount of time they spent in prayer this past week. And be honest. If you spent no time in prayer, then that number is 0. Maybe you spent a minute a day, so your number would be 7. Maybe you spent more time. Whatever it is, just be honest about it. And think about that number right now. Now, for those of you who have been in this journey with us, I want to ask you this. Do you remember your original number? Has your original number and this would go back 3 weeks ago, has your original number increased over that, has your number this morning, which would be the amount of time you spent in prayer this past week, has that increased over your original number? For those of you who are just starting this journey with us today, I want you to remember the number you have today. Because for the rest of this summer, I'm going to be preaching on prayer. I believe sincerely that if we are going to change our nation, and if Christians are going to be revived, it has to begin with prayer. Every great awakening in the history of our nation started not with preaching, but began with prayer. Now, from the text I read this morning, I want you to notice 5 things very quickly. And this is not into my points, but this is just what I find in this passage. First of all, distress drives us to prayer. Notice what David said. I took my troubles to the Lord. Now there's a unique idea, because we certainly complain about our troubles, don't we? And we always look for someone to blame. When, to be quite frank, most of our problems that we have is because of the bad decisions we have chosen to make. But here David, and most likely this psalm finds David fleeing from the wrath of Saul. He's hiding out. You see what it says in verse 5? How I suffer in far-off Meshach. It pains me to live in Cedar. He's on the move. So he says this, I take my complaints, I take my distress before the Lord. And now I think Glenn passed out outlines, those of you who like to follow along, but I don't think I included this in the outline. Number 2, look at verse 1 again. God hears my prayer, and he answered my prayer. Number 3, liars and deceivers are always present. It's nothing new. There will always be people who have their private agenda that has nothing to do with God, has nothing to do with your well-being. And David calls them liars and deceivers, and they are ever present. Verse 2, rescue me, O Lord, from liars and from all deceitful people. Then the 4th thing, the world's culture wearies our hearts. Do you know something I fear that maybe we have forgotten as believers? There was a fellow who wrote a song. It was the same man, his name escapes me right now, but he's the same man who wrote the song, I'll Fly Away. But he also wrote a song with the words that says, this world is not my home. I'm just passing through. Believers need to remember that this is not our final destination. Maybe if we would remind ourselves not to become too attached to the things of this world, our life would be better and our life would be happier. Someone said, what modernism did not steal from the church, materialism has. We have become so mesmerized with the same things of this world, and we still say the right things. We say that money is not everything, and things don't make us happen, but we seem to need to have more things in order for us to be content. Over a period of time, we will find less and less satisfaction. It's the law of diminishing return. If you seek your peace, your happiness in things that are transitory, you will never be content. Number 5, apart from a relationship with Christ, there is no peace. Look what he says in verse 7. I search for peace, but when I speak of peace, they want war. It seems to me that that is a good description of our culture today. We are in the midst of a battle that transcends national boundaries. And what is at stake is eternities. Let me share just a few verses with you. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 13. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Amen. There is a spiritual battle going on today. And I guarantee you, if you believe that the devil is some caricature that wears red underwear with a pointy tail and runs about with a pitchfork, then he has completely got you deceived. He appears as an angel of light that appears to be good. You know what? If sin was ugly, I would be the purest person who ever lived. But sin is never ugly. It is always alluring. It always draws us in. But then there are always consequences to bad behavior. Your adversary, the devil, is stalking you. He goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And that is not my opinion. That is the declaration of the Word of God. Listen to this. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into the captivity to the obedience of Christ. Wow. Paul is a master of the run-on sentence. He just keeps going on and on and on. He starts by talking about a warfare, but then he encourages us saying, listen, God has given us weapons that we can tear down these strongholds, these footholds that Satan has in our life and in our society. But if we are going to do that, then we have to bring every thought into the obedience of Christ. Your mind is an incredible thing. I mean, it really is. I'm not going to stray. I'm just going to keep it real. I mean, you think about how God has made you, but do you understand that every battle you fight begins in your mind? The Bible says, lust, when it has conceived, brings forth sin, but sin, when it has its finished work, brings forth death. Long before the prodigal left home and ended up in a pig pen, he, in his mind, imagined what it would be like to live life in the fast lane. His problem was his imagination was not true to form. Bringing every thought, every imagination into the obedience of Christ. I say this because it also speaks here of the weaponry that God has given us. Next to the Word of God itself, the most powerful weapon we have in our spiritual arsenal is prayer. Amen. It's not a club you pick up to physically beat off an enemy, because this is not a physical enemy. Our enemy is not physical. He is the prince and the power of the air, the adversary, the deceiver, the devil. And our weapons, therefore, must not be physical, but they are powerful enough to pull down strongholds and to cast down arguments against God. Do you think that we live in a Christian society today? Absolutely not. Our nation has become less and less Christian by the day. In Christ, there is no confusion over the sanctity of life. Amen. In Christ, there is no gender confusion. In Christ, in His world view, there is right and wrong, and situation ethics do not work. You cannot make something moral, although you may make it legal. And when it talks about tearing down strongholds, it's not talking about going out and physically doing battle. It's talking about utilizing the spiritual weapons you have. The Word of God brings your mind into the obedience of Christ. And prayer gives you a weapon to use against Satan, against his evil, and to use for God for His good and for your good. Too often, however, our prayers are casual. Do you remember the discussion 2 weeks ago? We talked about the difference between reactionary prayer and intentional prayer. We pray about it when it comes to mind. I will pray about this when I have time. Who has time if we don't take time? We pray when we are in trouble. We pray when we are in dire distress. That's reactionary prayer. That's defensive prayer. We're already in the hole, and we're asking God to get us out of it. But what we need to understand is Christians need to pray intentionally. And we need to be intentional in our prayer lives. Intentional means to be, or to do with purpose, to be deliberate. Intentional prayer requires both purpose and planning. Someone said, I'll wait till the end of the day and I'll pray before I go to sleep. Well, here's my prayer life if I do that. I'm at the end of my day, and I'm not a good sleeper because I intentionally never go to bed until I'm ready to go to sleep. And so it's, dear Heavenly, and there's drool running down my... That's unintentional prayer. That's what happens when we don't plan our prayer. Let's go back to the number. Remember your original number? You've had time to work on that, haven't you? Has your number increased, or are you stalemated? Intentional prayer is preventative maintenance for spiritual life. Intentional prayer will change us, and it will change our world. Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16. You are the light of the world. Who's speaking? Jesus. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. You know what Christians do today? We hide. We want to blend in. We don't want to make waves. And so instead of telling our friends about Jesus, we let them die and go to hell. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. We're light. And remember the old song we used to sing in children's church? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Are we? Do we let our light shine? Do your friends know you're a Christian? Does your family know you're a Christian? I mean a real Christian, not generic. Oh, I'm a Christian because I'm not a Muslim, or I'm not a Buddhist, or I'm not an atheist, so I guess I must be a Christian by default. That's generic Christianity. I'm talking about the born-again type where Christ is in your life and you are a new creation and He is really the center of your life. That's the kind of Christian who has light to shine. Satan is intentional, by the way. Did you know that? He goes about like a roaring lion, stalking us and trying to devour our faith, our hope, and our testimony. And if you are going to be a successful believer against him, we must be intentional in our prayer life. Now, I've got those of you who are visiting, this won't mean a thing to you, but to my regular attenders, this will scare the daylights out of you. I've got 10 points. I have a hard time getting in 3 most of the time, but I guarantee you, it is the 4th, or it is the holiday weekend, and I'll get you out before the 4th. How's that? I want to give you 10 ways to pray intentionally. Number 1, here's specific request. It's on your list. Ready? Lord, do something that will show people your glory over all the earth. We have a glorious God. Do you believe that? We used to sing a song back when I was a kid. We've got a great big wonderful God, a great big wonderful God, a God that's always watching over us. He's always victorious, a great big wonderful God. But most of us put God in a box and only pull Him out when we're in trouble, instead of living our lives and declaring in our hearts how wonderful God is. Psalm chapter 108, verse 5 and 6. Be exalted, O God, above the heaven, and your glory above all the earth, that your beloved may be delivered. Save with your right hand and hear me. Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 5. By the way, I love Habakkuk. You got to get to know him. He prophesied in Judah in a time when things were just going down. I mean, they were in the death spiral. And not only was Habakkuk concerned about his people, he was concerned about God. He said, God, are you around? Are you paying attention? Why aren't you doing something? This is what he said, Habakkuk 1:5. Look among the nations and watch. Be utterly astounded. Now, this is actually God responding to Habakkuk. For I will do a work in your day which you would not believe, though it were told you. I pray for God to do something amazing. I mean, just really something to get our attention. You know the last time I think God really got our attention? 9/11. Now, those of you today who are here and you're under 20 years, 9/11 don't mean a thing to you. It really doesn't. Because you didn't live through it. You didn't experience the trauma. You didn't know what it was like to be under attack. I remember it so well. Man, we were wondering when the next shoe was going to drop, didn't we? Yeah. I mean, you think about it. It scared all the planes out of the air. I mean, it got our attention. And for 3 weeks, we paid attention. But that's about all it lasted. About 3 weeks. And since then, I don't know even how to describe it, particularly the last few years. This is an opportunity for God to do something that no diplomat, no world leader, no army could possibly do, that the world may know that the Lord is God and that we desperately need Him. Number 2, I am being encouraged. I'm already on my second point. Lord, use these anxious and uncertain times to bring many to Christ. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. Finally, brethren, pray for us that the word of the Lord might run swiftly and be glorified just as it is with you, and that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, for not all have faith. Paul, when did you write this? Did you write this yesterday? Because it seems appropriate, doesn't it? Listen to it. Pray for us that the word of the Lord may run swiftly and be glorified just as it was with you. It made a change in the lives of the Thessalonians. It made a change in their city. In fact, it made such a change in their city that it got the attention of those who hated them, and the persecution was so great against them that they wrote to Paul and they said, "Has the tribulation begun?" Paul says, "No, but God's really done a work in you. And I want you to pray that everywhere I go, and every time I open my mouth, and every time I speak the word of God, that it may run swiftly and might be powerful." Now, maybe it would be good for us just to remember that when Paul wrote this, the Roman army, the Roman Empire was in authority. And the Roman Empire hated Christians. Can you imagine when they read this, "and that we may be delivered from unreasonable"? In Rome, Nero was dousing Christians in oil and using them in lanterns, lighting them up in his banquet. In Rome, they were sending believers into the Colosseum to be torn apart by wild beasts as entertainment. Unreasonable? Yeah, I think so. We think we've got it tough today. We think folks are negative toward Christianity today. Well, maybe one of the reasons people are negative toward Christianity today is because they've seen so many counterfeits. Maybe we need to show them the real thing. Psalm chapter 67, verse 1 and 2. "God be merciful to us and bless us and cause his face to shine upon us, Selah, that your way may be known on the earth, your salvation among all nations." Do you think the gospel is good for the world? Amen. Huh? Well, thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate it. Let's try that again. All right? I'm going to give you more. Ready? Same thing. Do you think the gospel is good for the world? Amen. Now, that still is nothing more than mediocre. I don't think some of you are convinced. Maybe that's the problem. Listen. If we had the cure for cancer, and we treated that cure for cancer like so often we treat the gospel, nobody would know. And we have the cure for eternity. Do you believe that? Or do you think, or have you bought into this thing, well, it really doesn't matter what you believe. Everybody's going to the same place. Many roads to the same place. And you know, just as long as you're sincere. So the blood of Christ didn't mean a thing, and the cross didn't mean a thing, and the resurrection didn't mean a thing. And apparently Jesus wasn't the Son of God, because if there's many ways, then what was he doing on the cross to begin with? And by the way, if there are many ways, then Jesus was a liar, because he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except by me." And it's either true or it's not. There's nothing in between. Well, I got to figure that one out. God can use this fearful time to reach hearts of men and women around the world. I believe that. Psalm chapter 53, verse 3. "What time I'm afraid, I will trust in you." What is there to have faith in today? I mean, I'm sorry. We got our mayor here today. God bless you, Mayor. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. But I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to place my faith in what I see on the national political scene today. I'm just not going to do it. That's not. If that's where my eternity lies, then I'm in a lot of trouble, and so are you, by the way. Huh? My faith is in Jesus. I pray for I don't agree with our president, but I pray for him. Lord knows he needs it. He needs the prayers, I need to practice. So we're both that's a win-win, see? But my faith is not in politics. Go with me as a middle school kid, an 8th grade boy, little Eddie Walls. Literally wanted to be president of the United States. You're not as smart as you look, right? No, you know me. Trust me. Let's move on. Point 3. Lord, guide our leaders to be instruments of your will on earth. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. I exhort therefore, that first of all, supplication, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceful life in all godliness and honesty. Again, let me remind you that Paul lives in the environment of the Roman Empire. The persecutor. Now this is what he's praying, that we may live a peaceable life. That we may live a peaceable life. Now don't mistake what Paul is saying. He's not saying, I want to go into covert mode here, kind of go underground and everything. But he was just saying, I just want to live my life. I want to live it faithfully. I want to be able to talk about Jesus. And so in order to do that, pray for our kings and everybody that is in authority. A believer has the responsibility to honor the king and to pray for those in authority, and it transcends political labels and issues. It is a spiritual responsibility we have. 1 Peter 2:17, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Proverbs 21:1, for the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Do you believe that? Yeah. I believe that God can do something. As the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. But you know the problem is, there's a verse in James that I think really talks about the problem we have. You have not because you ask not. How can we expect God to change the heart of the king if we're not asking him to? Number 4, Lord, protect the innocent. Psalm 41:1, blessed is he that considers the poor, the Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. Psalm 68:5, a father of the fatherless and a judge of the widows, in God in his holy habitation. Now I'm going to stir up strife, but I've never worried about that anyway. God did something recently to protect the innocent with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Who can be more innocent than the unborn? Now, the thing of it is this is a straw issue, and the reason it's a straw issue because Roe v. Wade, the reversal of it, did not ban abortion. It just put it back to the states. Do you really think that abortion is going to be outlawed in New Jersey? No. Do you really think it's going to be outlawed in New York? No. Absolutely not. So it's a straw issue. But here's what's happened in America. And this is much of a commentary as I'm going to make. We no longer talk. We no longer work through our issues. Instead, if we don't get our way, if some folks don't get our way, all they do is they are like a spoiled toddler who rant and rave and scream and holler, hoping they can get their way. Yeah. And that's what's going on in America. We've lost dialogue. We've lost it. One of my heroes in history, and you won't know anything about him, but I guess one of my heroes in history is because we have a common heritage, and that's Henry Clay of Kentucky. You know what they called him? They called him the Great Compromiser. He didn't compromise morals, but he knew how to bring opposite sides together. He should have been president of the United States, but that's another issue. In the violence of war, oppression, terrorism, only God can protect the innocent, whether they be children, citizens, victims, or victims of mad political schemes, or even those in combat. We need to always pray for those of our troops on the field. Today, I don't know, I think some folks think that freedom is something they pick off a tree. And that nobody ever had to pay a price for it. Nobody ever had shed any blood or anything like that. And it's just not true. Freedom's a precious thing, and we need to treat it as such. Number 5, Lord, use human authorities to punish evil doers. The whole purpose of human government, as mandated by God, did you know that God gave human government a mandate? As a mandate, is to punish evil and protect the good. Romans chapter 13, verse 3 and 4. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Now there's an amazing thought. Would you read that again? Let's look at it again. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing wrong, but in those who are doing right. We had our red, white, and blue last week. That's not just a day we have. We really believe that. We honor our authorities. Can I get an amen on that one? Amen. We honor them. I mean, defund the police. That's like saying outlaw air. Yeah. That's just as bright. That's just the way it is. God bless those men and women who go out in the field and protect us. And I don't fear them. Every so often, Mayor, I hope you don't hold against them. But every so often, I walk out of my office and I'll see one of the policemen sitting up here in a car on our property. And never once have I ever thought, oh my Lord, they found me. They've caught me. Oh no! Usually I go over and welcome them and tell them I'm glad they're here, and I like them being up here, The more they're up here, the more the bad people stay away. Guess what? I'm not going to finish this sermon today. But you didn't think I would anyway, 10 points, did you? So I'm going to stop for a moment and I'm going to tell you a little secret. Some of you are just going to be appalled when I tell you this. Now, it hasn't happened in a long time. But I have been stopped for speeding 13 times. 13 times. Now, I'm an old guy, and so I've slowed down in my old age, and that hadn't happened in a long time. But do you know how many tickets I've got out of 13 stops? Oh, no, I'm not that lucky. One out of 13. You know why? Because when they come up behind me and that bubblegum machine goes off and everything, and I hear that siren, I can't believe these guys are stopping me for speeding. You know what I think? Well, they caught me again. Doing their job! And you would be amazed how nice I am to deal with. Yes, sir, officer, how are you today? And I've never lied to them. I was in Texas, on the backside of Texas, going rural Texas. And to be honest with you, my odometer was broke, so I didn't know how fast I was going. But I was moving. And I met a highway patrolman at the top of a little rise. And when I met him, our eyes met, and he did this. I'm not going to run on this one. So I just pulled off the side. And he came up with me and he says, you know how fast you're going? No, not really. He said, why not? I said, because my odometer's broke. He said, did you know you were speeding? I said, absolutely. And he smiled, gave me a nice little warning, and sent me on my way. Followed me all the way back into town. Do you realize how slow you got to go if your odometer's broken? There's a cop right there. I'm glad those fellows are out there. The mandate of human government, the God-given mandate of human government, is to protect the innocent and to punish the good. Amen. And one of the problems we have today is we have stopped punishing the evil. If you do not punish bad behavior, you encourage it, is what you do. Do you remember the first time you ever did something that you knew was wrong? I had a great-grandmother who used to tell me that, she gave me a picture of God that was distorted. She was well-meaning in her distortion, but she put such a fear of God into me that I was so impressed by that I just knew that if I did something wrong, there was going to be an immediate punishment. And it doesn't work like that. And what happens is, the first time you do it, it's hard to do it. But when the world doesn't fall in on you, the second time is not quite as bad, and the third time is pretty easy. But eventually, it catches up to you. I want to go on record today by saying I pray for our government, but I pray for it to do what God has ordained it to do. Amen. To protect the innocent and to punish the evil. Ultimately, it is God Himself, sometimes using human instruments, who removes those who He does not want in authority. Listen to this. With this verse I close today, and I promise you next week I'll finish this sermon. I got 5 more points. It is He who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Don't worry about offending. In fact, maybe I ought to close with this thought. Remember when Jesus said, "Don't fear those who can only take your life. Fear the one who can take your life and destroy your soul in hell."